Picture this a dimly lit scriptorium in the 15th century, where the faint scent of ink and parchment lingers in the air. Here, a blind scribe sits hunched over a desk, his fingers tracing the contours of a page he cannot see. Yet his mind is ablaze with visions of a world only he can perceive. With painstaking precision, he crafts a book unlike any other, filling its pages with swirling, cryptic symbols and illustrations of plants that defy identification, celestial charts that map unknown skies, and figures that seem to step out of a dream. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a medieval mystery that has confounded scholars, cryptographers, and historians for over 500 years. How could a man without sight create a text so labyrinthine that even the brightest minds of our time still grapple with its secrets? The Voynich Manuscript isn't just a book, it's an enigma wrapped in vellum, a puzzle that has outlasted empires and defied every attempt at translation. Its pages are filled with an alien script, a language that bears no resemblance to any known alphabet, accompanied by drawings that oscillate between the fantastical and the eerily precise. Some believe it's a coded scientific treatise, others argue it's an elaborate hoax, and a few whisper that it holds secrets too profound for the uninitiated. But at the heart of this mystery lies the scribe himself, a figure shrouded in shadows, whose very existence challenges our understanding of what's possible. How did a blind man produce a work of such intricate detail? What drove him to create something so deliberately opaque? And why has this book refused to yield its secrets, even after centuries of scrutiny? This is the story of resilience, of a mind that saw beyond the limits of the physical world, and of a legacy that continues to captivate us today. As we unravel the tale of the blind scribe and his incomprehensible masterpiece, we'll journey through the alleys of medieval Europe, where knowledge was power and books were treasures guarded fiercely. We'll explore the theories that have emerged over the years, from alchemical codes to lost languages, and weigh the evidence that ties this mysterious text to its creator. But more than that, we'll uncover what the Voynich Manuscript reveals about human curiosity itself, our relentless drive to solve the unsolvable, to decode the indecipherable, and to find meaning in the shadows of history. So settle in, because what follows is a journey into one of the most enduring puzzles of all time, a story where every turn of the page brings us closer to the truth or deeper into the mystery. The blind scribe behind the Voynich Manuscript remains a shadowy figure, his name lost to time, his life recorded only in faint traces and tantalizing hints. In medieval Europe, blindness was often seen not just as a disability but as a different way of engaging with the world, one that could be harnessed. Monasteries and scriptoria frequently trained blind individuals as scribes, valuing their extraordinary sensitivity to touch and sound, skills sharpened by necessity. Imagine the rhythm of their quills moving across parchment with a precision guided by memory and muscle rather than sight. This scribe would have relied on assistants to describe illustrations, dictating the bizarre flora and celestial diagrams that fill the manuscript's pages, transforming verbal descriptions into strokes of ink. Other blind scribes from the period offer glimpses into this overlooked tradition. Take, for example, the 12th century monk John of Worcester, who composed detailed chronicles despite his blindness, or the unnamed scribes of Burgundy, who produced illuminated manuscripts through collaborative methods. Their work proves that blindness didn't preclude artistry, it demanded innovation, but the Voynich scribe went further. His manuscript isn't just functional, it's flamboyantly cryptic, layered with symbols that suggest a mind reveling in abstraction. Was this a deliberate act of defiance, a way to assert control over a world that often dismissed the blind as mere record keepers? The challenges would have been immense. Without sight, every illustration, every curling vine, every star chart had to be meticulously described, then translated into lines he could never verify. The text itself, with its undecipherable script, hints at a private language, perhaps one shaped by the scribe's unique sensory world. Did he see letters as textures or words as rhythms? The very opacity of the manuscript might be its most telling feature, a refusal to conform to the visual logic of his peers. In an era where knowledge was power, this scribe wielded mystery as his tool, crafting a book that would outlast kings and confound centuries. What began as parchment and ink became a mirror reflecting not just one man's ingenuity, but the boundless adaptability of the human mind. The Voynich Manuscript isn't just another medieval tome gathering dust in a library. It's a physical paradox, a book that dares you to understand it while refusing to reveal its secrets. Bound in fragile vellum and filled with over 200 pages of cryptic symbols, its very existence feels like a challenge. Flip through its folios, and you'll encounter sprawling botanical illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, their roots twisting into impossible shapes. Elsewhere, naked women wade through elaborate tubes of green liquid, while celestial charts map constellations no astronomer has ever identified. And then there's the script, a flowing, alien alphabet with no clear ties to any language, past or present. It's as if the scribe distilled dreams onto parchment, creating a visual and linguistic labyrinth with no key. When antiquarian Wilfred Voynich stumbled upon the manuscript in 1912, tucked away in a chest at an Italian Jesuit college, he believed he'd found a lost masterpiece of Renaissance science. But as scholars pored over its pages, their confidence turned to frustration. Cryptographers who had cracked wartime codes found themselves baffled. Linguists searched in vain for patterns, while historians debated whether the illustrations were fantastical or merely misunderstood. Even the carbon dating of the vellum, placing its creation between 1404 and 1438, offered no real answers, only deepening the mystery. Was this a coded herbal manual, its plants disguised to protect valuable medical knowledge? A heretical text, its meaning obscured to avoid persecution? Or something far stranger? Theories have spiraled for over a century. Some argue it's an elaborate hoax, crafted to deceive wealthy collectors, yet the sheer effort involved, from the costly vellum to the months of meticulous penmanship, makes this seem unlikely. Others propose it's a lost language, perhaps a constructed one like Esperanto's medieval ancestor. More tantalizing are the whispers of alchemy, a visual representation of processes too dangerous to describe plainly. But the most compelling clue might lie in the scribe himself. Blindness forced him to rely on touch, memory, and the descriptions of others, shaping a text that operates on a different sensory logic. Those strange botanical drawings, they might not depict real plants, but tactile memories, how a stem feels curling around fingers, how petals crumple when crushed. The script's rhythmic, repetitive strokes could mirror the cadence of speech as heard by someone for whom sound was primary. What emerges is a radical idea. The Voynich manuscript isn't just hard to decode, it might never have been meant to be read in the conventional sense. Its creator wasn't just writing, he was translating an interior world onto the page, one shaped by absence as much as invention. In that light, every failed attempt to crack its code says less about the manuscript's obscurity and more about our own limitations. We're trying to read it with eyes wide open when its truth might only reveal itself to those willing to close them. Inside the scriptorium's hushed chambers, where candlelight flickered against stone walls, the air hummed with quiet industry. Rows of scribes bent over wooden desks, their quills scratching in unison across sheets of carefully prepared parchment. Each manuscript was a labor of devotion, parchment scraped thin with knives, inks mixed from soot and oak galls, gold leaf pressed into illuminated letters that caught the light like miniature suns. For sighted scribes, the process was grueling but straightforward. Eyes tracked each line, hands replicated letters from exemplars, and illustrations bloomed under guided strokes. But for a blind scribe, every step transformed into an act of extraordinary adaptation. Without sight, the world of the scriptorium unfolded through touch and sound. Imagine fingers tracing the faint ridges of a ruling frame, a tool pressed into parchment to create raised lines, an invisible grid guiding the quill's path. Assistants might recite texts aloud, their voices shaping words into mental images, while stylely carved wax tablets for drafting, allowing errors to be smoothed away with a palm. The blind scribe's inkpot wouldn't just hold pigment. Its weight, its position on the desk, even the viscosity of the ink when stirred became cues to prevent spills. And when it came to illustrations, collaborators would describe scenes in exhaustive detail. The plant's leaves fan outward, each vein branching like a river delta, transforming language into line. This tactile methodology could explain the Voynich Manuscript's most bewildering traits. Those unidentifiable plants, they might be composites stitched together from verbal descriptions of multiple species, blended in the scribe's mind like a botanical collage. The bizarre nymphs bathing in green tubes, perhaps a misinterpreted account of alchemical distillation, described as figures swimming through liquid emerald. Even the script's repetitive, rhythmic strokes hint at a system built on memorized patterns, where letters were less visual symbols and more physical motions, like a musician playing scales by muscle memory. Medieval scribes often left marginal notes, complaints about stiff fingers, cold rooms, or bad ink. But the Voynich scribe's margins are silent, his presence felt only in the work itself, a testament to ingenuity forged in darkness. Where others saw limits, he found possibility, crafting not just a book but a mirror to the mind's ability to reshape the world. The manuscript's mysteries endure not because they are unsolvable, but because they ask us to step beyond sight, to read with fingers instead of eyes, and listen for the whispers hidden in parchment's pores. Memory was the unseen ink of medieval scribes, flowing through their minds long before it ever touched parchment. For a blind scribe, this mental reservoir wasn't just helpful, it was essential. Imagine committing entire books to memory, not as a feat of showmanship, but as a daily necessity. Monasteries buzzed with the murmur of recitation, where texts were passed down orally long before they were written. Blind scholars like the 7th century Bishop Didymus the Blind were legendary for their ability to quote scripture verbatim, their minds functioning as living libraries. Even sighted scribes relied on mnemonic devices, rhymes, rhythms, and visual associations to anchor complex material. But for the Voynich scribe, memory wasn't just a tool, it was the very lens through which he interpreted the world. The manuscript's pages might hold clues to this mental landscape. Take the so-called Herbal section, filled with plants that defy botanical classification. Could these be amalgamations not of species but of sensory memories? A leaf described as velvet with serrated edges might merge with another recalled as scented like pepper, resulting in a hybrid that never grew in any earthly garden. The scribe's tactile relationship with plants, perhaps gathered for medicinal use, would have prioritized texture and scent over visual accuracy. Even the manuscript's infamous astronomical diagrams, with their unidentifiable stars, might reflect celestial patterns memorized through poetic descriptions rather than observed coordinates. Oral traditions of the time offer a fascinating parallel. medieval mnemonics often tied abstract concepts to vivid, even bizarre imagery, a technique known as the memory palace. To remember a philosophical treatise, one might imagine Aristotle juggling flaming comets in a cathedral. The Voynich Manuscript's surreal illustrations, women bathing in emerald tubes, roots morphing into celestial spirals, could serve a similar purpose, not as literal depictions, but as mental anchors for complex ideas. If the scribe was transcribing an oral tradition, his symbols might encode knowledge meant to be unlocked through recitation, not sight. This perspective flips the script on centuries of frustrated analysis. Scholars have scrutinized the manuscript's visuals, assuming they represent physical reality, when they might instead map the contours of a mind that saw through sound and touch. The repetitive, rhythmic script could mirror chants or prayers, its cadence designed to aid recall rather than convey conventional meaning. In an age when memory was both art and science, the Voynich Manuscript might not be a riddle to solve, but a performance to experience, an invitation to close our eyes and listen. The illustrations in the Voynich Manuscript don't just defy identification, they seem to defy reality itself. Flip through its pages, and you'll find plants with leaves like spiraling staircases, roots that twist into geometric knots, and flowers blooming in patterns no botanist has ever documented. Then there are the celestial diagrams, concentric rings of stars that don't match any known constellations, floating in skies that feel both familiar and utterly alien. And let's not forget the human figures, those nude women submerged in tubs of green liquid, their bodies connected by elaborate networks of tubes and vessels, like some alchemical blueprint for life itself. These aren't just drawings, they're visual riddles begging the question, how does a blind scribe produce images so detailed, yet so detached from the tangible world? The answer might lie in collaboration. Picture the scribe seated at his desk, listening as an assistant describes a plant plucked from a monastery garden. The stem is thick with hairs like fine thread, the assistant might say, and the leaves, they're jagged like a knight's falchion. But without sight, the scribe's mind would fill gaps with tactile memory, how a serrated leaf feels against fingertips, how a petal crumples when pressed. The result, a hybrid creation, part description, part sensory interpretation. Those otherworldly plants might not be fantasies, but reconstructions, like a game of medieval telephone, where each translation from eye to voice to hand introduced subtle distortions. Some scholars even suggest the scribe used tactile models, running his fingers over carved wooden botanicals or wax molds of celestial spheres, translating their contours into ink. Medieval art had strict conventions, herbs were drawn with symbolic clarity, stars followed Ptolemaic charts, and human figures adhered to religious iconography. Yet the Voynich Manuscript flouts every rule. Its Herbal section lacks the practical labeling of a medical manual. Its stars ignore classical astronomy, and its nymphs owe nothing to biblical or mythological tradition. This isn't carelessness, it's deliberate deviation. The images might not be trying to depict the world as it was seen, but as it was understood through touch, sound, and metaphor. That tub of green liquid, could it represent the primordial waters of alchemy, described to the scribe as a bath where metals are reborn, those unplaceable constellations? Perhaps they're not maps of the sky, but of spiritual realms, charted through poetic analogy rather than observation. And then there's the tantalizing possibility that these images aren't illustrations at all, but ciphers. Medieval scholars loved encoding knowledge. Think of Hildegard of Bingen's symbolic visions, or the cryptic emblems of alchemists. A blind scribe, already working in a world of abstracted senses, might have taken this further, using visual motifs as placeholders for complex ideas. A star could stand for a planet's astrological influence, A twisting root might symbolize the growth of the soul, and those green tubes could encode a recipe for an elixir. If so, the manuscript's nonsense script might not translate linearly. It could require reading images and text in concert, like a musical score where notes and lyrics intertwine. This brings us to the manuscript's greatest enigma, its language. The text curls across pages in a script that feels almost musical, with characters that resemble Latin, Greek, and Arabic yet belong to none of them. Some letters repeat in rhythmic clusters like incantations. Others stand isolated like punctuation in an unknown system. Linguists have tried every tool, frequency analysis, pattern matching, even AI, and found no consistent grammar or vocabulary. But what if we're missing the point? For a blind scribe, writing wasn't just visual, it was kinetic, the shapes of letters mapped to the motion of his hand. The words might not represent speech at all, but something more visceral, the cadence of a chant, the pulse of a heartbeat, or the tactile memory of fingers tracing Braille before Braille existed. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't just challenge our eyes, it asks us to read with our hands, our ears, and perhaps even our intuition. The script of the Voynich Manuscript doesn't just resist translation, it defies the very rules of language as we know it. At first glance, its characters appear almost familiar, with shapes reminiscent of Latin or medieval shorthand, yet they form no recognizable words. The alphabet itself is a puzzle, with around 20 to 30 distinct characters, some resembling loops or exaggerated flourishes, others like miniature stars or twisted vines. What's even more baffling is how these symbols behave. Certain sequences repeat with eerie regularity, like musical refrains, while others appear only once in the entire manuscript, as if the scribe switched codes mid-sentence. There's no punctuation, no clear breaks between words or paragraphs, just an unbroken river of symbols flowing from margin to margin, as if the text were one continuous thought. For centuries, cryptographers have approached this script like a lock to be picked. In the 1920s, William Friedman, the genius behind breaking Japan's purple cipher during World War II, turned his attention to the Voynich, convinced it held a sophisticated cipher. His team identified patterns, repetitive prefixes, clusters of symbols that might denote numbers or names, but the deeper they dug, the more the manuscript resisted. Decades later, military codebreakers and linguists armed with computers tried frequency analysis, comparing the script's patterns to known languages. Yet the results were inconclusive. The text lacks the uneven letter distribution found in real languages, no equivalence to English's love of E or Arabic's reliance on Aleph. Instead, the symbols repeat in near-perfect rhythm like a chant or incantation. Then came artificial intelligence, hailed as the key to finally cracking the code. In 2019, a team used machine learning to compare the manuscript structure to hundreds of languages, from Hebrew to Old Norse. The algorithm suggested a possible connection to Hebrew, until linguists pointed out the translation was gibberish, a mirage created by statistical noise. Another AI attempt in 2021 proposed that the script might be encoded Old Turkish, but again, the decoded text made no sense. The problem isn't just the script's complexity, it's that every tool we use assumes the text follows linguistic rules the scribe might never have known. This is where the scribe's blindness becomes crucial. Without sight, his relationship to language would have been fundamentally different. Imagine writing without ever seeing letters. Your script might prioritize touch over form, creating symbols based on how they feel to draw rather than how they look. The Voynich's curling, repetitive strokes could reflect this, each character shaped by the motion of the hand rather than visual conventions. Some researchers propose the script isn't a language at all. but a tactile notation system like sheet music for ideas. Those repetitive word-like clusters, they might represent recurring sounds or concepts anchored in the scribe's memory rather than grammar. There's another possibility, far more provocative. The manuscript was never meant to be read. In medieval Europe, some texts were deliberately obscure, their knowledge accessible only to initiates. Alchemists wrote in riddles to protect their secrets. Mystics used symbolic alphabets to veil divine truths. Could the scribe, aware of his unique perspective, have crafted a book that only the blind, metaphorically or literally, could understand? The Voynich Manuscript's greatest lesson might be that some mysteries aren't puzzles to solve, but invitations to rethink how language, knowledge, and perception intertwine. Every failed decipherment isn't a defeat. It's a reminder that the human mind can create codes as boundless as imagination itself. We often assume books exist to be read, their words digested, their messages understood. But what if the Voynich manuscript was never meant for reading at all? In the Middle Ages, writing served purposes far beyond simple communication. Texts could be acts of devotion, puzzles for the initiated, or even keys to unlocking higher truths. Alchemists penned treatises in layered metaphors, where the green lion devouring the sun wasn't fantasy but coded chemistry. Mystics like Hildegard of Bingen invented entire alphabets to transcribe divine visions, their letters shimmering with sacred meaning. For them, obscurity wasn't a flaw, it was the point. This manuscript's impenetrability might follow the same logic. Its pages lack the practical markers of a working text, no page numbers, no marginalia, no corrections. Instead, it feels ritualistic, like a monk's copy of scripture painstakingly penned as meditation. The scribe could have been engaging in a spiritual exercise, each stroke of the quill a prayer, each symbol a step toward enlightenment. Some medieval monks practiced lectio divina, reading not for information but to commune with the divine. Perhaps the Voynich was meant to be read this way, not decoded but experienced, its very opacity a mirror for the seeker's patience and humility. Parallels abound in other unreadable medieval works. The Rohank Codex, a Hungarian manuscript from the same era, flaunts a script that still defies translation. The Ripley scrolls, filled with alchemical emblems, make sense only to those versed in their symbolic language. Even Dante's Divine Comedy was initially dismissed as nonsense by some, its layers of meaning accessible solely to those who knew how to look. Secrecy was cultural currency in the Middle Ages. Guilds guarded craft techniques with ciphers. Herbalists disguised potent remedies in riddles to protect knowledge from misuse. For the blind scribe, whose world was already shaped by alternative ways of knowing, creating an indecipherable book might have been less about hiding truth than redefining what reading could mean. Consider the possibility that the manuscript is an intellectual experiment, a blind man's challenge to the very idea that knowledge must be visual. His symbols might represent concepts rather than words, like a tactile version of medieval memory arts, where ideas were mapped to vivid mental images. Those swirling plants and starry wheels could be mnemonic anchors, designed to trigger associations known only to him. In an age when books were rare and precious, perhaps this was less a text to be shared than a mind's echo chamber, a place to externalize thoughts too complex for speech. The cultural weight of secrecy adds another layer. Medieval Europe thrived on hierarchies of knowledge. What peasants weren't meant to understand, clerics guarded fiercely. Heretical movements like the Cathars wrote in codes to avoid persecution. Even the church's liturgy, recited in Latin, was a barrier between the initiated and the masses. For a blind scribe whose access to power relied on his mastery of the unseen, crafting an unreadable book might have been an act of quiet rebellion. proof that the marginalized could wield mystery as deftly as kings wielded swords. The Voynich Manuscript endures not because it withholds answers, but because it asks us to question something deeper. When we call a book unreadable, are we admitting its failure or ours? In medieval Europe, knowledge wasn't just power, it was currency, weapon, and salvation all at once. Guilds guarded their craft techniques like state secrets, punishing anyone who leaked the formulas for Venetian glass or Flemish wool dye. Apothecaries encoded their most potent remedies in riddles, fearing both theft and accusations of witchcraft. Even the Church, while preaching universal truth, reserved Latin liturgy for the educated elite, leaving the masses to experience scripture through stained glass and sermon. This culture of secrecy wasn't paranoia, it was survival. A single herbal recipe could mean the difference between life and death, and an astrological chart in the wrong hands might be branded as heresy. Against this backdrop, the Voynich Manuscript's impenetrability starts to make sense not as an anomaly, but as a product of its time. Take the case of medieval alchemists who wrapped their experiments in layers of symbolism. A recipe for distilling mercury might be described as the serpent swallowing its tail, not to confuse but to protect. The infamous Ripley scrolls, filled with fantastical illustrations of dragons and kings, weren't fairy tales, they were chemical processes disguised as allegory. Similarly, medical texts often omitted key ingredients or used code names. Mandrake root became the little man, and opium was the tears of the moon. For the blind scribe, whose very existence depended on oral transmission and trust, encoding knowledge might have been second nature. If the Voynich contains herbal lore, its alien plants could be deliberate distortions, ensuring only initiates could recognize the real specimens. Then there's the shadow world of heretical knowledge. Groups like the Cathars, who rejected church doctrine, circulated clandestine texts in vernacular languages, their pages smuggled in wine barrels or sewn into hems. The manuscript's zodiac illustrations, especially the unconventional nymphs in their tubes, have sparked theories linking it to banned fertility rituals or Gnostic creation myths. Could it be a survival manual for a persecuted sect, its symbols acting as silent sermons? The timing fits. The early 15th century saw crackdowns on mystics and free thinkers across Europe. Even the manuscript's vellum, carbon dated to this volatile period, hints at a creator working under pressure, perhaps commissioned by a patron who needed secrecy as much as scholarship. Historical figures like Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a known collector of occult manuscripts, or the enigmatic alchemist Edward Kelly, who claimed to speak with angels through crystal, have been floated as possible sponsors. Rudolph's court was a magnet for cryptographers and astrologers, a place where a book like the Voynich wouldn't raise eyebrows but invitations, yet the scribe's blindness adds a twist. In a world where most secrets were kept by the sighted, his manuscript becomes a subversion, a text where the blind lead the blind, not as fools but as initiates. The very act of creating an unreadable book flips the script on medieval power dynamics, proving that knowledge could hide in plain sight, waiting for those with the right senses or the right silence to uncover it. This brings us to the manuscript's most persistent theory, authorship by the 13th century polymath Roger Bacon, a Franciscan friar obsessed with optics, cryptography, and the limits of human perception. Though the carbon dating rules him out, the legend persists because it reflects our longing to tether mystery to genius. But what if the truth is simpler? The scribe might have been no one famous, just a man turning his disability into a cipher, crafting a book that asked not to be seen but felt. In an age where light was equated with divine truth, his work whispers a radical idea: some truths thrive in the dark. Theories about the Voynich Manuscript's origins range from the scholarly to the spectacular, each one a testament to how fiercely this book resists categorization. Some point to Roger Bacon, the 13th century Franciscan friar whose experiments with optics and cryptography made him a legend. Bacon's fascination with hidden knowledge and his alleged use of mirrors to see the unseen have fueled speculation that he crafted the manuscript as a coded scientific treatise. But carbon dating places the vellum firmly in the 15th century, long after Bacon's death, forcing proponents to argue it's a later copy of his lost work. Others champion John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer, who collected esoteric texts and claimed to communicate with angels through cryptic scripts. Yet no direct link exists between Dee's library and the manuscript's provenance. More grounded theories suggest the work of medieval herbalists or early alchemists. The University of Prague in the early 15th century was a hotbed for such thinkers, blending botany, astrology, and medicine. Could the manuscript's unidentifiable plants be encrypted remedies, their true identities disguised to protect trade secrets? The nymphs in green tubes might then represent distillation processes, with the liquid symbolizing the elusive quintessence alchemists sought. This would explain the scribes' collaboration with sighted assistants. Herbal knowledge was often passed orally, with blind practitioners renowned for their tactile expertise in identifying plants. Then there's the blind scribe's candidacy as a polymath operating outside traditional systems. Medieval courts sometimes employed blind scholars as cryptographers, their unique perception seen as an asset for crafting unbreakable codes. The manuscript script, with its rhythmic repetitions, mirrors mnemonic techniques used by oral cultures to preserve complex information. Perhaps the scribe wasn't just copying text but composing a tactile encyclopedia, weaving together astronomy, botany, and medicine into a format only the initiated could navigate. Fringe theories, though less credible, reveal much about our obsession with the manuscript. Claims of extraterrestrial origins or lost Atlantean languages say more about modern desires for cosmic mysteries than medieval realities. Yet even these ideas underscore a truth. The Voynich challenges our assumptions about how knowledge should look and who gets to create it. Scientific analyses have added new layers to the puzzle. Microscopic studies show the ink contains iron gall, common in medieval Europe, while multispectral imaging reveals no hidden text beneath the surface, only the deliberate strokes of a confident hand. Statistical analyses of the script's patterns suggest it's not random, but structured in ways that defy known linguistic models. These findings don't solve the mystery, they deepen it, proving the manuscript wasn't haphazardly made but crafted with precision, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, even if we still don't. Modern science has turned its sharpest tools toward the Voynich manuscript, not to dismiss its mystery, but to measure its depth. Carbon dating, the same technique used to authenticate ancient relics, placed the vellum between 1404 and 1438 squarely in the early 15th century. This single finding swept away decades of exotic theories, proving the manuscript wasn't smuggled from Atlantis or dictated by angels. Yet the revelation only anchored the puzzle more firmly in history. The inks analyzed through spectroscopy matched iron gall formulas common in medieval Europe, with traces of copper and zinc suggesting a scribe who sourced materials meticulously, perhaps even alchemically. Every scientific test confirmed the book's authenticity while deepening the question: how could something so ordinary in materials be so extraordinary in content? Advanced imaging techniques peeled back layers invisible to the naked eye. Multispectral scans, which uncover faded or erased text, revealed no hidden underwriting, just the original ink applied with deliberate precision. This ruled out palimpsest theories, the idea that the manuscript was scraped and reused over an older text. Instead, it showed a creator working with singular purpose, every stroke intentional. Even the quill's pressure variations, detectable through high-resolution scans, suggested a scribe whose hand moved with rhythmic certainty, as if guided by muscle memory rather than hesitation. Artificial intelligence has become the latest torchbearer in this centuries-long quest. Machine learning algorithms, trained on hundreds of languages and ciphers, have parsed the manuscript's script for patterns no human eye could detect. Some programs flagged possible correlations with Semitic or Romance languages, while others generated nonsensical translations, proof that AI, like its human predecessors, can chase phantoms. Yet these failures are paradoxically revealing. The manuscript's resistance to computational brute force suggests its language might operate on different rules entirely, shaped by a mind that perceived words as textures or sounds rather than visual symbols. The most tantalizing clue lies in the manuscript structure. Statistical analysis shows its word distributions aren't random, but follow a pattern closer to natural language than cipher. Some sequences recur like refrains, hinting at poetic meter or liturgical repetition. Could this be a blind scribe's oral composition, transcribed not as speech but as its echo? Teams are now experimenting with sonification, converting the script's symbols into musical notes to test whether its secrets are auditory rather than visual. What emerges from these studies isn't just data, but a portrait of the scribe's world. The vellum's imperfections, the ink's chemistry, even the quills where patterns sketch a figure deeply connected to medieval craft traditions, yet operating at their fringes. Science has confirmed the manuscript's earthly origins, but its meaning remains suspended between the tangible and the ineffable, a testament to one mind's ability to encode imagination in a language only he could speak. As technology advances, each new tool becomes a kind of prosthetic sense, letting us inch closer to seeing the world as the scribe did, not with eyes but with hands, ears, and the boundless terrain of thought. Artificial intelligence has become the latest torchbearer in the centuries-long quest to crack the Voynich Manuscript, wielding computational power that would have seemed like magic to the scribe himself. Machine learning algorithms dissect the text symbols with relentless precision, scanning for patterns invisible to human eyes. In 2017, a Canadian team trained an AI to compare the manuscript structure to hundreds of languages, from medieval Latin to Sumerian. The program tentatively suggested Hebrew as a possible match, not because it translated the text, but because the script's word lengths and repetition patterns loosely mirrored Semitic languages. Yet when linguists attempted to apply Hebrew grammar rules, the results were gibberish. The AI had found a shadow of a pattern, but the manuscript, true to form, danced just out of reach. Another breakthrough came when researchers treated the script like a cipher rather than a language. Using neural networks designed to crack wartime codes, teams tested everything from simple substitution, replacing each Voynich symbol with a Latin letter, to complex polyalphabetic systems where symbols shift meaning based on position. Some models identified clusters that might indicate numbers or names, while others flagged sequences resembling Romance language suffixes. But each time, the same problem emerged. The manuscript's internal logic defies cryptographic norms. Most ciphers have consistent rules, like Caesar's cipher, where every letter shifts uniformly. The Voynich, by contrast, seems to follow rules only its creator understood, rules shaped by a mind that experienced language through touch and sound rather than sight. The limits of AI here reveal something profound. Machines excel at finding patterns within frameworks we provide, but the Voynich manuscript operates outside those frameworks. Its language might not be a cipher or a lost tongue, but something more fluid, a tactile notation system, or even a synesthetic blend of sensory inputs. Imagine a scribe for whom the letter A wasn't a shape but a texture, a sound, a rhythm of hand movements. An AI trained on visual alphabets would never grasp that, just as a sighted scholar might struggle to describe color to someone blind from birth. Yet the very failure of these high-tech attempts underscores the manuscript's cultural power. It has become a mirror for our technological age, reflecting both the prowess and the limits of artificial intelligence. We've built machines that can beat grandmasters at chess and predict protein structures, yet a 15th century book, penned by a blind man, still resists decoding. This isn't just a historical curiosity, it's a reminder that human creativity can outwit even the most advanced algorithms, not through complexity, but by operating on an entirely different plane. The manuscript's legacy lives on in unexpected ways. Modern artists reimagine its botanical pages as surrealist masterpieces, while cryptographers borrow its symbols for cybersecurity experiments. Universities offer seminars dissecting its cultural impact, and Reddit threads debate its origins with equal parts rigor and whimsy. It has inspired novels, symphonies, and even an indie video game where players translate its pages to unlock a mystery. This enduring fascination speaks to something deeper than academic interest. The Voynich Manuscript is a testament to the allure of the unsolved, a reminder that in an era of instant answers, some mysteries refuse to surrender. What began as one man's solitary labor in a candlelit scriptorium has become a collective obsession, bridging medieval craftsmanship and artificial intelligence. The scribe could never have imagined his book would baffle supercomputers, but perhaps he'd smile knowing that, centuries later, we're still learning to see the world through his fingers. From the hushed halls of academia to the flashy screens of prime-time television, the Voynich Manuscript has transcended its medieval origins to become a full-fledged pop culture phenomenon. What began as a niche puzzle for cryptographers now fuels everything from blockbuster video games to speculative Netflix documentaries, its eerie pages repurposed as plot devices and artistic muses. Take Assassin's Creed, where the manuscript appears as a shadowy artifact tied to ancient conspiracies, or The X-Files, which wove it into an episode about extraterrestrial botany. Even indie games like Cypher Prime's Fractal borrow its aesthetic, transforming those cryptic symbols into interactive puzzles. The manuscript's allure lies in its perfect ambiguity. It's a blank canvas for imagination, a Rorschach test where gamers see hidden codes, novelists glimpse forbidden lore, and conspiracy theorists detect proof of lost civilizations. This cultural ascension mirrors our modern obsession with unsolved mysteries. In an age of information overload, the Voynich taps into the same thrill as viral puzzles like Cicada 3301 or the crypto sculpture at sea, aya headquarters enigmas that resist Silicon Valley's promise of instant answers. It's no coincidence that the manuscript surged in popularity alongside the rise of NFTs. Both trade on the idea of unique, unfathomable artifacts whose value lies in their exclusivity. Yet where NFTs often crumble under scrutiny, the Voynich's mysticism only deepens with time. Historian Deborah Harkness, author of the All Souls trilogy, wove the manuscript into her fantasy series precisely because it embodies the tension between the knowable and the unknowable, a theme that resonates in an era polarized by misinformation and blind faith in algorithms. But pop culture's embrace comes with trade-offs. Documentaries like The Voynich Mystery on the History Channel often prioritize spectacle over scholarship, framing the manuscript as a Da Vinci Code-style treasure map rather than a nuanced historical artifact. YouTube theories range from plausible a proto-constructed language to absurd time-traveling botanists, diluting serious research with noise. Even well-intentioned portrayals, like the novel Codex Seraphinianus, risk reducing the manuscript to aesthetic inspiration, divorcing it from the blind scribe's lived reality. Yet these adaptations also democratize its magic. When a teenager doodles Voynich style plants in a sketchbook or a TikTok user stitches together a decoding theory, they're participating in a centuries-old tradition, the human urge to project meaning onto the unexplained. The manuscript's pop culture siblings reveal why it endures. Compare it to the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek computer reconstructed through patient scholarship, or the Beale ciphers, which promise buried treasure if solved. Unlike these, the Voynich offers no tangible reward, no gold, no groundbreaking tech, just the tantalizing possibility of revelation. That's its genius. It commodifies curiosity itself. Modern audiences, drowning in answers but starved for wonder, cling to artifacts that remind us how much we don't know. As physicist Richard Feynman once said, the pleasure of finding things out lies in the hunt, not the catch. The Voynich Manuscript, in all its uncrackable glory, is the ultimate hunt, one where the chase outshines the finish line, and every generation gets to write its own ending. Perhaps that's why it outshines even history's most famous unsolved texts. The Dore Bella cipher, a musical code from the 1800s, lacks the Voynich's visual drama. The Tamon Shud case, though chilling, is rooted in grim reality, not imaginative possibility. The manuscript's blend of art and mystery makes it uniquely adaptable, a medieval Rorschach test that invites us to project our own obsessions onto its vellum. Whether framed as alchemy, aliens, or an elaborate medieval prank, its power lies in refusing to declare a single truth, and in a world desperate for certainty, that refusal feels like rebellion. The Voynich manuscript isn't alone in its defiance. History shelves are crowded with texts that taunt us with their secrecy. Take the Zodiac Killer's cipher letters from the late 1960s, their jagged symbols splashed across newspapers like a serial killer's grotesque signature. Where the Voynich feels like a whispered riddle, the Zodiac's codes were weapons designed to terrorize and dominate. Cryptographers cracked some messages revealing chilling boasts, but others remain locked, their unsolved grids mirroring the era's paranoia about unseen threats lurking in plain sight. Then there's the Dore Bella cipher, a delicate swirl of symbols penned by composer Edward Elgar in 1897. Was it a love note to a friend, or just a musical mind doodling in code? Unlike the Voynich, its mystery feels intimate, a fleeting thought frozen in ink. What ties these puzzles together isn't just their impenetrability, it's how they mirror the fears and fascinations of their time. The 15th century, when the Voynich was crafted, was an age of hidden knowledge. Alchemists encoded recipes to avoid persecution, while the church guarded scripture like state secrets. The manuscript's ambiguity might have been survival, its strange plants and stars a veil over heresy or innovation. Fast forward to the Zodiac's 1960s America, and codes became tools of control, their brutality reflecting a society gripped by Cold War dread and media spectacle. Elgar's whimsical cipher, by contrast, belongs to the Romantic era's obsession with private sentiment, where even a postcard could be a sonnet in disguise. Yet the Voynich stands apart. Military ciphers serve strategy, love letters whisper to one heart, but what was the blind scribe's purpose? His book lacks the Zodiac's malice or Dore Bella's intimacy. Instead, it feels like a testament to the act of creation itself, a meditation on how knowledge can be shaped by absence. Those other codes assume a reader, the Voynich might not. Its language could be a private dance of hand and memory, symbols strung together like beads on a rosary, meant for ritual rather than revelation. That's the thread connecting humanity's unbreakable texts, not just the thrill of the unsolved, but the way they force us to confront the limits of understanding. We project onto them, seeing threats, romance, or divine secrets because their silence is a canvas. For the blind scribe, that silence might have been the point. In a world where knowledge was power, his manuscript redistributed it, offering not answers but an invitation to listen beyond words, to read with more than eyes. While the zodiac's codes scream and Elgar's hum, the Voynich simply breathes a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be broken but felt. The blind scribe's true legacy isn't just a book no one can read. It's the way his existence shatters centuries of assumptions about disability and creativity. Medieval Europe often relegated the blind to the margins, viewing them as objects of charity or divine punishment. Yet in the shadows of monasteries and courts, blind scholars like our scribe were quietly redefining what it meant to contribute to knowledge. Consider the paradox. A man denied sight produced one of history's most visually arresting manuscripts, its pages brimming with illustrations that continue to captivate and confuse. This wasn't just skill, it was subversion. Where society saw limitation, the scribe saw possibility, crafting a work that demanded collaboration, innovation, and a radical reimagining of how knowledge could be transcribed. History's record is littered with similar overlooked figures. Take Zaryab, the 9th century Persian polymath who revolutionized Andalusian music and cuisine despite being exiled and visually impaired. Or Teresa de Cartagena, a 15th century nun who wrote profound theological treatises while deaf, her work arguing that physical difference could sharpen intellectual and spiritual insight. These weren't exceptions, they were proof that disability often forced ingenuity, yet their stories were diluted or erased by chroniclers who equated bodily wholeness with capability. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a rare surviving counter-narrative, a tangible rebuttal to the idea that only the sighted could shape cultural memory. Modern scholarship is finally catching up. Disability historians now point to artifacts like the Voynich as evidence of cryptic ingenuity, the way marginalized individuals develop alternative methods to navigate a world not designed for them. The scribe's tactile approach to writing, his reliance on oral description, even the manuscript's rhythmic script all suggest a mind operating outside visual conventions. In an era when most books were copied by rote, his work bursts with originality, as if blindness freed him from the tyranny of traditional forms. This challenges not just medieval biases but our own. How many other unreadable texts might be waiting for us to expand our interpretive tools beyond the visual? The ethics of decoding such works loom large. Every time a scholar claims to have cracked the Voynich, they impose their own frameworks, linguistic, cryptographic, even neurotypical, onto a text that might demand entirely different modes of understanding. It's telling that many proposed solutions assume the manuscript must contain practical knowledge, herbals, star charts, alchemical recipes. What if its value lies not in utility but in method? The scribes process his collaborative creation. His sensory translation might be the real revelation, a blueprint for how knowledge can be constructed beyond dominant paradigms. This tension echoes in modern efforts to recover marginalized histories, when linguists work with indigenous communities to revive oral traditions, or when disability activists archive sign language poetry. They confront similar questions. Who decides what counts as legible? Whose systems get privileged? The Voynich Manuscript, in its stubborn opacity, forces us to sit with these discomforts, Perhaps its greatest lesson is that some histories resist assimilation, not because they're broken, but because they operate by different rules. The scribe didn't just write a book, he left us an invitation to broaden our very definition of what writing can be. There's something sacred about the unsolved, a quiet power in the unanswered question that keeps us leaning in, searching, wondering. The Voynich Manuscript has thrived for centuries precisely because it resists explanation, becoming not just a book but a mirror for our collective imagination. But now, as artificial intelligence and advanced cryptography inch closer to potential breakthroughs, we're forced to ask, would cracking its code be a triumph of human ingenuity or a theft of its magic? Imagine standing before a locked door for 500 years, only to finally turn the key and find what? A Herbal manual, a star chart. The anticlimax might be more devastating than the mystery itself. This isn't just academic pondering, it's a question of ethics. The blind scribe crafted his manuscript in an era when knowledge was often veiled, accessible only to those deemed worthy. What if its indecipherability was intentional, a way to safeguard esoteric truths or protect vulnerable ideas from persecution? Decoding it against that intent feels uncomfortably like breaking a seal never meant to be broken. Compare it to the unsealing of Vatican archives or the decipherment of indigenous texts. Revelations can illuminate history, but they can also strip communities of their narrative control. Who gets to decide when a secret should stay buried? Scholars in ivory towers, governments with funding, or does the manuscript as a relic of human creativity belong to everyone and no one? The rise of AI adds another layer of tension. Machines analyze patterns with cold precision, but can they grasp the scribe's tactile poetry, the way his quill might have lingered on a curve to mimic the feel of a vine, or how a cluster of symbols could echo the rhythm of a chant? Algorithms don't dream, and the manuscript is nothing if not a dream given form. Relying on artificial intelligence risks reducing its layered mysteries to binary solutions, like explaining a sunset with only wavelengths and forgetting the awe. Yet, isn't that what tools do? Expand our reach, even at the cost of something intangible? Preservation complicates the debate further. Each time a researcher handles the fragile vellum, or a scanner's light bleaches its pigments, the manuscript becomes a little less itself. Carbon dating and multispectral imaging have already left their mark. How much more should we sacrifice in pursuit of answers? The Rosetta Stone, cracked and crowded under museum glass, serves as both a triumph and a cautionary tale. Some artifacts transcend their physical form. The Voynich might be more valuable as an idea than an object. Perhaps the real lesson lies in balance. We can honor the scribe's legacy not by abandoning the quest, but by reframing it, not as a race to conquer the manuscript's secrets, but as a dialogue with its creator. Every failed decryption, every new theory, is a tribute to his vision, proof that his work still stirs minds centuries later. The Voynich doesn't need to be solved to be significant. Its power lies in the questions it asks us about creativity, disability, and the boundaries of human understanding. Some doors are meant to remain ajar, letting the light through just enough to keep us curious. The Voynich manuscript is more than a puzzle. It's a fragile relic, its vellum pages whispering of 6 centuries of survival. Each folio, thinner than an autumn leaf, bears the scars of time, ink slowly fading, edges fraying like worn lace, pigments once vibrant now muted to ghostly hues. At Yale's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, conservators wage a quiet battle against decay. The manuscript rests in a climate-controlled vault, shielded from light and humidity, handled only with gloves and breathless care. Even the act of turning a page requires surgical precision, as the parchment, though durable, has grown brittle with age. This isn't just preservation, It's a pact with history, ensuring the book outlives yet another generation of seekers. Digitization has transformed access, letting anyone with an internet connection scrutinize the manuscript's enigmatic pages in high resolution. The Voynich scans reveal details invisible to the naked eye, quill strokes layered like tree rings, faint impressions left by the scribe's stylus, even the occasional fingerprint smudged in marginalia. For researchers, this democratization is revolutionary. A botanist in Brazil can study its alien flora alongside a cryptographer in Norway, while a high school student in Tokyo tests decoding theories over breakfast. Yet for all its benefits, digital replication has limits. No screen can convey the vellum's texture, how it resists the fingertip like cured silk, or how certain pigments shimmer under angled light. The manuscript's physicality, so vital to understanding its blind creator's process, remains locked away. This tension between access and preservation sparks fierce debate. Should the original be displayed, risking damage to let visitors share the scribe's tactile world? Or does its survival depend on near-total seclusion, with even scholars limited to digital surrogates? The Voynichs compromise occasional exhibitions under dim, filtered light reflects the delicate balance, but the manuscript's mystique thrives in this duality. Its scarcity fuels obsession, while its digital shadow invites global collaboration. Enter the amateur sleuths, a vibrant subculture dissecting scans with tools medieval monks couldn't fathom. Online forums buzz with theories. A retired engineer in Ohio claims the script mirrors Appalachian folk symbols, while a Swedish linguist argues it's Proto-Romany. Some overlay star charts onto the zodiac pages, others train neural networks to spot patterns. Most solutions crumble under scrutiny, but collectively, these enthusiasts form a living archive of human curiosity. Their very persistence honors the scribe's legacy, proving his masterpiece still commands attention across centuries and continents. The Voynich may rest in a vault, but its mystery belongs to the world. The Voynich Manuscript isn't just the domain of academics in ivory towers, it's a puzzle that's been embraced by a sprawling, passionate community of amateur sleuths, linguists, and everyday enthusiasts. From retired engineers to high school students, people from every corner of the globe have thrown themselves into the mystery, armed with nothing more than curiosity and an internet connection. Online forums like the Voynich Ninja and Reddit's r/Voynich buzz with activity, where theories are debated, dissected, and sometimes debunked within hours. This isn't just idle speculation. It's a living, breathing collaboration where a botanist in Brazil might spot a detail in the herbal section that a cryptographer in Poland connects to medieval alchemical symbols. The manuscript's enigma has become a rare equalizer, a challenge where expertise in obscure fields like 14th century dye recipes or Aramaic script fragments can matter as much as a PhD. Take the story of a Canadian high school teacher who, in 2015, noticed that the manuscript's botanical illustrations bore a striking resemblance to plants from central Mexico. Her theory, initially dismissed by some scholars, gained traction when researchers confirmed that certain species like the soap plant depicted in the manuscript were native to the Americas. Or consider the retired NSA cryptographer who spent years applying Cold War-era code-breaking techniques to the text, convinced it was a complex cipher rather than a language. While his efforts didn't crack the code, his meticulous notes became a cornerstone for later researchers. These breakthroughs from unlikely sources underscore a radical truth. The Voynich's secrets might not be unlocked by a single genius, but by the collective ingenuity of a crowd. The rise of citizen science platforms has turbocharged this collaboration. Projects like Zooniverse's Voynich expeditions invite volunteers to transcribe symbols or analyze pigments, turning the manuscript into a shared experiment. Crowdsourcing has even led to accidental discoveries, like the time a music theorist realized the script's repetitive patterns mirrored medieval musical notation, sparking a short-lived but fascinating detour into sonic decryption. What makes these efforts so compelling isn't just their creativity, but their defiance of traditional academic gatekeeping. For centuries, historical research was confined to those with access to rare libraries or institutional backing. Now, anyone with a laptop can scrutinize high-resolution scans, test hypotheses, and contribute to a dialogue that's as global as it is grassroots. Yet this democratization isn't without friction. Academics sometimes bristle at the flood of outsider theories, while amateur researchers chafe at perceived dismissiveness. The tension echoes broader debates about who gets to interpret history and whose voices are deemed authoritative. But the Voynich community has found ways to bridge these divides. Collaborative platforms like the Voynich Discord server have become virtual labs where professors and hobbyists trade insights, peer review each other's work, and even co-author papers. The manuscript's impenetrability, oddly enough, has fostered a culture of mutual respect. Since no one has the definitive answer, everyone's perspective carries weight. Beyond the thrill of the hunt, the Voynich phenomenon has unexpected educational ripple effects. Teachers use it to spark students' interest in paleography and cryptography, while coding bootcamps challenge apprentices to build AI decryption tools. Museums host Voynich-themed workshops where kids create their own, unbreakable codes, blending history with STEM. The manuscript's greatest gift might be its ability to make learning feel like detective work, proof that the past isn't a static set of facts, but a living puzzle waiting to be explored. What began as one blind scribe's solitary labor has become a testament to the power of collective curiosity. The Voynich manuscript refuses to belong to any one discipline, era, or intellect. Instead, it invites us all to become scribes of a sort, to trace its mysteries with our own hands, and in doing so, add another layer to its enduring legend. Imagine a high school classroom where students aren't just memorizing dates or formulas, but grappling with a mystery that defies easy answers. The Voynich manuscript, with its tangled script and uncanny illustrations, isn't just a relic, it's the ultimate teaching tool, a bridge between skepticism and wonder. Educators are discovering that this enigmatic book can sharpen critical thinking like nothing else. Picture students dissecting its pages, not to solve it, but to ask the right questions. Is this a language or a cipher? Are these plants real or imagined? Why would someone create a book no one could read? These aren't just academic exercises, they're lessons in humility, teaching that some puzzles resist brute force solutions and that ambiguity itself can be a teacher. One powerful exercise involves tasking students with crafting their own, unreadable texts. Armed with quills and homemade iron gall ink, they collaborate in pairs, one describing an object or scene verbally, the other translating it into symbols without looking. The results are startlingly Voynich-like, hybrid drawings that blend memory and imagination, scripts that prioritize rhythm over readability. Suddenly, medieval scribble practices feel visceral. A student describing a smartphone to a peer might end up with a squiggle labeled "glass that whispers," while a sunset becomes concentric rings of fire melting into water. These experiments reveal how knowledge transforms when filtered through different senses, fostering empathy for the blind scribe's creative process. The manuscript's interdisciplinary nature makes it a rare unifying force in education. Biology classes analyze its botanical sections, debating whether those twisting roots could represent real medicinal plants or allegories for human anatomy. Math students apply statistical analysis to its symbols, hunting for patterns that might hint at linguistic structure. Art history majors scrutinize its illustrations alongside medieval herbals, noticing how convention bends under the scribe's unique constraints. Even computer science gets involved, with pupils training simple neural networks to generate Voynich-style glyphs. This cross-pollination mirrors the Renaissance ideal of knowledge as a cohesive whole, reminding us that the boundaries between science and art are modern inventions. Beyond skills, the manuscript cultivates something rarer: historical empathy. When students attempt to write blindly or decode each other's symbol systems, they confront the physicality of pre-Gutenberg literacy. They feel the weight of vellum, the fragility of ink, the hours required for a single page. A teenager accustomed to typing essays in minutes gains new respect for the scribe's lifetime of labor. Discussions inevitably turn to disability and innovation, how limitations can birth new forms of expression. The manuscript becomes a lens to examine other marginalized creators, from deaf composers like Beethoven to autistic scientists like Temple Grandin, proving that difference often drives discovery. Today, the Voynich resonates as a symbol for our information-saturated age. In a world where answers are a click away, it stands as a monument to the unsolvable, a reminder that not all mysteries yield to data. Modern artists riff on its aesthetics, embedding QR codes in painted, herbal pages that link to glitching videos. Tech ethicists invoke it when critiquing AI's limits, noting how even the most advanced algorithms fail to pass its human ambiguity. The manuscript's endurance whispers a counterintuitive truth, that in an era obsessed with transparency, there's still power in secrecy, and that some knowledge thrives precisely because it refuses to be owned. So the next time you hear someone dismiss the humanities as impractical, point them to the Voynich Manuscript. Here's a 600-year-old puzzle that teaches coding and cryptography alongside empathy and art history, that turns classrooms into collaborative scriptoria where failure is part of the lesson. Its value lies not in solutions but in the conversations it sparks, the way it makes us rethink what we know and how we know it. In a world racing toward answers, the Voynich dares us to sit with the question. The Voynich Manuscript isn't just a medieval curiosity, it's a mirror for our modern age, reflecting the fractured way we communicate and the walls we build around knowledge. Think about how information travels today. Algorithms tailor our news feeds, locking us into echo chambers where facts bend to fit preconceptions. The manuscript's unbreakable code feels eerily familiar in a world where disinformation spreads faster than truth and where even language itself becomes a battleground. Its symbols, impenetrable yet meticulously crafted, echo the way social media dialects, emojis, memes, niche slang create insider languages that exclude as much as they connect. The scribe's work, once seen as an outlier, now feels prophetic, a reminder that every era has its unreadable texts, whether they're penned in vellum or pixels. Consider the parallels with digital privacy. Just as the manuscript's creator might have shrouded herbal knowledge to protect it from misuse, today's encrypted messages and blockchain ledgers guard secrets with similar intent. Both are acts of defiance, one against medieval censorship, the other against data mining. Yet there's a darker twist. Where the scribe's obscurity preserved rare wisdom, modern encryption can also shield harm. Hate groups cloaking agendas in coded language, or algorithms amplifying conspiracy theories too convoluted to debunk. The Voynich challenges us to ask, when does secrecy serve the collective, and when does it fracture it? The manuscript's endurance as a mystery also speaks to our hunger for unsolved puzzles in an age of instant answers. In a world where Google resolves queries in milliseconds, the Voynich remains a stubborn counterweight, a testament to the value of lingering questions. It's no accident that interest in the manuscript has surged alongside deepfake videos and AI-generated art. Both confront us with the limits of our tools. Just as cryptographers can't crack the scribe's code, we lack reliable ways to authenticate digital media. The manuscript becomes a medieval deepfake of sorts, its authenticity unquestioned but its meaning perpetually out of reach. This tension between knowledge and ambiguity resonates personally, too. Each of us has our own Voynich manuscripts, relationships, experiences, or traumas that resist neat interpretation. A childhood letter filled with half-remembered slang, a grandparent's diary entry veiled in euphemisms, even our own fragmented memories that shift with every retelling. The scribe's work invites us to sit with these gaps, to recognize that some truths aren't meant to be decoded but felt. History's greatest mysteries, from the Antikythera mechanism's celestial gears to the Indus Valley script's undeciphered symbols, share this quality. They remind us that the past isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation across centuries. What makes the Voynich manuscript timeless isn't just its defiance of explanation, but its ability to adapt to our anxieties. In the 1970s, it was a Cold War metaphor, a cipher that even NSA supercomputers couldn't break. Today, it's a lens for examining algorithmic bias or the ethics of AI archaeology. Its pages, though static, keep rewriting their relevance, proving that the most enduring artifacts are those that leave room for us to project, to question, to wonder. The scribe, in his darkness, crafted something that outshines the glare of modernity, a reminder that not everything needs to be transparent to be meaningful. Sometimes the most profound truths hide in plain sight, waiting not for better tools, but for wiser eyes. There's something almost primal about the way unsolvable puzzles hook into our minds, refusing to let go. The Voynich manuscript isn't just a curiosity, it's a testament to humanity's deep-seated need to confront the unknown, even when answers remain just out of reach. Psychologists call this the information gap theory. Our brains treat knowledge like a puzzle missing its final piece, triggering a dopamine rush when we edge closer to filling it. It's the same mechanism that makes cliffhangers irresistible or conspiracy theories addictive. But with the Voynich, that gap never closes. It dangles the promise of revelation while guarding its secrets fiercely, turning every failed decryption into a tantalizing near miss rather than a dead end. Neuroscience reveals even more fascinating layers. Functional MRI scans show that when subjects encounter ambiguous patterns like the manuscript's cryptic script, their prefrontal cortex lights up with activity, the brain's problem-solving hub working overtime. What's remarkable is that this response is strongest not when a solution is found, but during the struggle itself. The Voynich thrives in this sweet spot between frustration and fascination, offering just enough structure to suggest meaning, those recurring symbol clusters, the meticulous illustrations while withholding the key. It's the intellectual equivalent of a melody resolving on a suspended chord, leaving us itching for resolution. Philosophers have wrestled with this allure for centuries. Immanuel Kant argued that the sublime experiences too vast or complex to fully comprehend elicits a unique awe. The Voynich fits this perfectly. Its very indecipherability elevates it from mere artifact to something transcendent. Medieval mystics understood this power, crafting texts like the Ripley scrolls that blended alchemy and allegory, their meanings shimmering just beyond grasp. Today, we see echoes in phenomena like the Cicada 331 puzzle or cryptos, the coded sculpture at sea, our headquarters enigmas that bind communities in collective curiosity. The manuscript's endurance lies in its ability to be both a mirror and a Rorschach test, reflecting back whatever the seeker brings to it. What's equally compelling is how the scribe's blindness plays into this dynamic. By creating a text divorced from visual conventions, he inverted the usual hierarchy of knowledge. In a world where seeing was synonymous with understanding, his work insists that truth can exist beyond the visible spectrum. This taps into a broader cultural tension, our simultaneous hunger for answers and our need for mysteries that resist them. From quantum physics to existential questions, some of humanity's greatest leaps begin with embracing the unknown. The Voynich Manuscript, in all its stubborn opacity, invites us to sit with that discomfort, to marvel not just at what we know, but at all we don't. So what's your white whale of historical puzzles? A cipher from the Renaissance, a lost language etched on a Neolithic tablet? Drop your favorites in the comments, because the real magic of these enigmas isn't in solving them, but in the conversations they spark across centuries. Which brings us back to our blind scribe, hunched over his desk in that dim scriptorium. His legacy isn't just a book no one can read, but a reminder that some of history's most profound gifts are the questions they leave unanswered. The blind scribe's journey is one of transformation, taking the constraints of his world and reshaping them into something extraordinary. Picture the rhythm of his days, fingers tracing the faint ridges of ruled parchment, ears absorbing descriptions of plants and stars he'd never see, translating those whispers into ink with a precision that still baffles us. His method wasn't just adaptation, it was reinvention. Where others relied on sight, he built a system of touch and memory, collaborating with assistants to render visions he could only imagine. The Voynich Manuscript, in all its confounding beauty, isn't a work born of limitation. It's proof that disability can reframe creativity, turning absence into a canvas for innovation. Look closer at the manuscript's pages, and you'll see more than cryptic symbols. You'll find traces of a mind that refused to accept the boundaries of conventional knowledge. Those unidentifiable plants, they might be sensory composites, blending textures and scents described to him into forms no botanist would recognize. The celestial charts, unmoored from observable skies, could reflect celestial mechanics explained through metaphor rather than mathematics. Even the script, with its rhythmic repetitions, hints at a language shaped by oral tradition, where words were felt as much as written. This wasn't just a blind man copying texts. It was a thinker constructing an entirely new way to record ideas, one that privileged the tactile and the auditory over the visual. Historically, disability has often been framed as a deficit, a narrative the Voynich Manuscript appends with every enigmatic page. While medieval records typically reduced the blind to objects of pity or divine punishment, the scribe's work asserts something radical. That difference can be a lens for discovery. Compare his approach to that of his sighted peers, who reproduced Herbals with rigid accuracy. Where they mimicked, he reinterpreted, filtering knowledge through a perspective that saw beyond surface appearances. In an era obsessed with visual symbolism, where gold leaf represented divine light and symmetry signaled perfection, his manuscript dares to suggest that truth might reside in textures, rhythms, and the spaces between symbols. The manuscript's enduring mystery also forces us to confront gaps in our historical understanding. For centuries, scholars dismissed non-normative experiences as footnotes, prioritizing the narratives of those who fit dominant paradigms. The scribe's invisibility in conventional records, no name, no patron, no definitive origin, mirrors the erasure of countless marginalized figures whose contributions were overlooked. Yet his work survives, challenging us to ask, how many other unreadable texts might be waiting for us to expand our interpretive tools? How much history remains locked because we've failed to consider alternative ways of knowing? As we close this chapter, the Voynich Manuscript leaves us with a question far richer than what does it mean? It asks, how do we read not just its pages but the past itself? History isn't a static puzzle to solve. It's a conversation across time, one that demands we listen with more than our eyes. The Scribe's legacy isn't just a book that resists translation. It's an invitation to rethink who gets to write history and whose voices we've trained ourselves not to hear. In the end, his greatest cipher might be this: sometimes the most profound truths aren't hidden in the ink, but in the hand that held the quill. The Voynich Manuscript does more than baffle scholars. It cracks open a door to histories we've overlooked, revealing how marginalized voices shaped the medieval world in ways we're only beginning to recognize. Think of the scribe's blindness not as a barrier, but as a lens that refracted knowledge into something entirely new. In an era where disability was often framed as divine punishment or pity, his work stands as a quiet act of defiance, proving that innovation thrives at the edges of what society deems normal. This isn't just about one manuscript. It's about the countless untold stories of those who contributed to history from the shadows, the blind cartographers who mapped cities through touch, the deaf musicians who composed by feeling vibrations, the neurodivergent scholars whose unconventional thinking birthed breakthroughs. Their absence from traditional narratives isn't an accident. It's a reflection of who gets to write history and whose legacies we've been taught to value. Consider the case of Trota of Salerno, an 11th century woman whose medical treatises were attributed to male colleagues for centuries, or the anonymous Muslim artisans who perfected papermaking in medieval Spain, their techniques fueling Europe's intellectual revolution while their names faded from record. Even within monasteries, where chroniclers meticulously recorded every detail of daily life, the labor of disabled scribes was often anonymized, their identities swallowed by the collective scriptorium. The Voynich Manuscript escapes this erasure not because its creator was named, but because his work was too singular to ignore. Its very strangeness, those uncanny plants, that rhythmic script forces us to reckon with the possibility that difference wasn't just accommodated in the Middle Ages. It could be the engine of genius. This recalibration of history isn't merely academic. It's a corrective to how we imagine progress. For too long, the narrative of medieval science and art has been a parade of great men: Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, Gutenberg, while the collaborative, often invisible labor of women, disabled scholars, and people of color was relegated to footnotes. Yet the parchment tells another story. The vellum the scribe used was likely prepared by a guild of artisans, many of them women, who mastered the chemistry of transforming animal skin into writing surface. The inks might trace back to Moorish Spain, where Arab chemists pioneered vibrant pigments. Even the manuscript's survival, passed hand to hand across centuries, depends on countless unnamed custodians who recognized its worth without understanding its meaning. Modern efforts to reclaim these stories are gaining momentum. Digitization projects are unearthing manuscripts with marginal notes in feminine handwriting, while spectral imaging reveals layers of correction and commentary by overlooked contributors. Disability historians are combing monastic records for references to blind teachers or deaf interpreters, piecing together a more nuanced picture of medieval life. The Voynich Manuscript, once treated as an outlier, now serves as a rallying point for this movement, proof that exclusionary archives can still hide revolutionary voices. As we turn to the manuscript's future, its greatest gift might be the questions it prompts rather than the answers it withholds. How many other texts languish in libraries, dismissed as too odd or incomprehensible because we lack the frameworks to engage them? What might we learn if we approach history not as a puzzle to solve, but as a chorus of perspectives waiting to be heard? The scribe's legacy isn't just a challenge to decode his book, but an invitation to redefine what counts as knowledge and who gets to create it. In that light, the Voynich isn't an endpoint, but a beginning, a key to unlocking histories we've yet to imagine. Will we ever truly unravel the Voynich Manuscript secrets, or is its mystery destined to outlast us all? The answer lies somewhere between cutting-edge technology and the timeless human urge to solve the unsolvable. On one hand, breakthroughs in artificial intelligence offer tantalizing possibilities. Machine learning algorithms grow more sophisticated by the day, capable of detecting patterns across languages and ciphers that would take humans lifetimes to notice. Recent experiments with neural networks trained on medieval scripts have teased out faint structural similarities between the Voynich symbols and extinct dialects, though no smoking gun yet. Then there's multispectral imaging, which can uncover erased or faded text invisible to the naked eye, already used to reveal hidden notes in Galileo's manuscripts. Applied to the Voynich, it might expose compositional layers or corrections that could hint at the scribe's process. Yet for every technological leap, the manuscript pushes back with confounding elegance. Carbon dating confirmed its medieval origins, but radiocarbon analysis can't tell us why certain plant illustrations resemble New World species centuries before Columbus. Advanced statistical linguistics can map the script's rhythms, yet its symbols refuse to align with any known grammatical structure. Even crowdsourcing, which cracked the CIA's crypto sculpture in part, has yielded only fragmented theories when applied to the Voynich. The paradox is this: the tools we've invented to decode the past may be fundamentally mismatched to a text created by a mind that perceived language through touch and sound rather than sight. Interdisciplinary approaches show promise where single fields hit walls. Botanists collaborating with historians have identified plausible real-world counterparts for some of the manuscript's alien plants by analyzing leaf vein patterns against medieval herbals. Material scientists studying the ink's metallic composition found traces of zinc and copper, hinting at possible alchemical influences. Cognitive linguists propose the script might represent a constructed language, like Tolkien's Elvish, a private code blending the scribe's native tongue with tactile symbolism. These patchwork methods mirror how the manuscript was likely created, through collaboration between the blind scribe and sighted assistants, blending sensory perspectives into something entirely new. Perhaps the most profound revelation isn't about solving the puzzle, but redefining what solving means. Some artifacts resist not because they're broken, but because they operate by different rules. The Rosetta Stone was decipherable because it said the same thing three ways. The Voynich offers no such Rosetta. Its power may lie precisely in its opacity, a reminder that not all knowledge fits neatly into categories. Like quantum particles that change behavior when observed, some texts transform under scrutiny, their meanings shifting with each generation's questions. This doesn't mean we should stop trying. Every failed attempt, from Renaissance cryptographers to modern AI, adds another layer to the manuscript story, turning it into a palimpsest of human curiosity. The real breakthrough might come when we stop asking, "What does it say?" and start asking, "Why does it fascinate us?" The answer to that question says more about who we are than any translation ever could. So keep testing theories, keep questioning assumptions, and above all, keep wondering, because sometimes the search itself is the treasure. History thrives on the unsolved, those tantalizing gaps in our understanding that keep the past from becoming a static exhibit. The Voynich manuscript isn't just a medieval artifact, it's a living conversation, a puzzle that refuses to ossify into a single answer. Think of Beethoven's late string quartets. their dissonant beauty resisting easy interpretation, or the enigmatic smile of the Mona Lisa, forever hovering between joy and melancholy. These works endure not despite their ambiguity, but because of it. The blind scribe, in crafting a book no one could read, might have understood this better than anyone. His manuscript isn't a failure of communication. It's a masterclass in the art of leaving room for wonder. Consider how differently we engage with resolved mysteries versus open-ended ones. The decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs in the 19th century was a triumph, but it also transformed an ancient civilization's writings from sacred symbols into translatable prose. The Voynich, by contrast, remains a mirror reflecting back whatever questions we bring to it. A botanist sees uncanny flora, a cryptographer spies ciphers, a poet finds dream logic. This plasticity is its genius. Like Kafka's unfinished novels or Basquiat's layered canvases, its power lies in the spaces between what's said and unsaid, inviting each generation to project its own anxieties and aspirations onto the vellum. The scribe's relationship to this ambiguity might have been deeply personal. In a world that often dismissed the blind as passive recipients of charity, he reclaimed agency through obscurity. His manuscript could have been a private language, a tactile diary never meant for outsiders, or perhaps it was a gift of perpetual curiosity, a deliberate refusal to close the door on interpretation. Medieval scribes often copied texts verbatim, but this scribe, constrained by sight yet liberated from visual conventions, created something that resisted replication. Every stroke of his quill was an act of defiance against the idea that knowledge must be transparent to be valuable. There's a quiet rebellion in embracing the unresolved. Modern culture obsesses over closure, spoiler-filled reviews, life hacks, algorithms that predict our desires before we articulate them. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a counterpoint, a reminder that some questions are more vibrant when left unanswered. It's the same impulse that draws us to star maps with uncharted constellations or ocean trenches still untouched by sonar. These gaps aren't voids, they're invitations to keep exploring, to stay humble in the face of all we don't know. So the next time you encounter an unanswerable riddle, whether in a crumbling manuscript or a relationship that defies easy labels, remember the scribe. His legacy isn't a locked door, but an open hand, offering not solutions but the thrill of the search. Some truths aren't meant to be pinned down like butterflies in a display case. They're alive, flickering at the edges of understanding, and sometimes that's exactly where they belong. The blind scribe sits once more in the flickering candlelight of our imagination, no longer just a figure shrouded in mystery, but a visionary who redefined the boundaries of human creativity. His fingers, tracing the contours of a world he could not see, gave shape to something far greater than a book, a testament to the resilience of the mind and the audacity to create even when the world insists on limits. The Voynich Manuscript, with its labyrinthine script and uncanny illustrations, isn't merely a puzzle to be solved. It's a mirror reflecting our own relentless curiosity, our hunger to make sense of the incomprehensible. For 6 centuries, it has whispered a single, humbling truth. Some knowledge refuses to be tamed, and that refusal is its own kind of gift. What makes the manuscript so extraordinary isn't just its defiance of translation, but the way it reimagines the very act of communication. In an era where information is often reduced to bite-sized clarity, the Voynich stands as a monument to ambiguity, a reminder that meaning can thrive in the spaces between what we understand and what we feel. It challenges us to consider how much of history's brilliance was crafted by those operating outside conventional frameworks. The blind scribe with his tactile alphabet, the deaf composer who heard music in vibrations, the neurodivergent thinker whose patterns of thought defied linear logic. Their legacies don't just fill gaps in our knowledge, they expand our sense of what's possible. As we close this journey, think of the manuscript not as a locked door, but as an open window, one that lets in the light of questions we've yet to ask. It invites us to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, to find wonder in the unresolved. Whether it's an encoded herbal, an alchemical treatise, or one man's private meditation, its true power lies in its ability to unite us in collective curiosity. Scholars and amateur sleuths, artists and scientists, we're all bound by the same thrill of the hunt, the same itch to peel back another layer of the mystery. Thank you for joining this exploration of ink, vellum, and the boundless terrain of human imagination. If this story resonated with you, consider liking or subscribing to dive deeper into history's enigmas. Drop a comment below with your own theories or share another historical puzzle that keeps you up at night. And as we part ways, let's carry forward the words of the astronomer Carl Sagan, who once wrote, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." The Voynich Manuscript is proof that the incredible isn't just in the knowing, it's in the search itself. Keep wondering, keep questioning, and above all, keep looking with more than just your